Scourge Eternal Blackout Issue 1. Since Archie Sonic Online takes forever to get issues though, this is the next best thing I have to a resolution of Scourge's plotline. Too bad it's not anywhere near done yet. We start out earlier in Mercia on Anti-Mobius at a graveyard. Why Mercia? Where there's a gravekeeper visiting with a lantern. Since he calls the gravestone his love, I assumed the person under it was his wife. And he gets mad at hearing a shriek because people are trespassing instead of being concerned about someone's well-being. This page had me immediately detached and disappointed because it wasn't any of the characters I knew. But at least it shows that we aren't expected to believe every civilian on Anti-Mobius is evil. I'd rather call it Anti-Mobius, even if it was never called that in the comic, because it sets it apart way more from the word Mobius. He goes up closer to a gravestone, and it's foggy purely for dramatic effect, and I'm pretty confused as some dark text bubble accuses him of not wanting the light touching him. Huh? He has a lantern. Of course he wants light. There's a knocking, and he goes up to it, and all of a sudden it gets struck by red lightning and it scares him. But it looks less like a gravestone, and more like a house, because it's got a red rooftop on it. Like it's really Boomer's lab and he's doing an experiment. What's going on? I don't like it when stories aren't very clear. Especially since I've read 3 issues ahead and I still don't know what this intro is all about. We see what's apparently a crypt get destroyed by a red tornado. The gravekeeper runs away and we see what looks like Metal Sonic come out from under the ground. Why was he in the ground? If he was made, why wouldn't he be completely destroyed by now? Used for his materials? Who would make him if there's no evil Robotnik in this world? Why would he be underground instead of out being useful for whoever made him? I could only imagine Boomer making him in this world. Also, his ears and the things around his Metal Sonic eyes don't look nearly blue enough. If that's somehow supposed to be Super Scourge, despite not looking purple at all, then the same thing applies. Why is he underground and talking nothing like Scourge? And there's no white around his ears either. Seriously, what was the point of him doing this stuff in the graveyard? So far I'm nothing but confused and attached. This intro shouldn't have happened. We finally come to what should have been the first page of the story. I have to wonder why it's day instead of night though, like it clearly was at the end of Scourge Lockdown. Scourge escaped from prison at night, and Fiona had her argument with him on the same night. It wouldn't make sense for them to escape during the day. And this is picking up right from their previous argument when he said he was going to do his own thing. Did they all stop their argument and just go to sleep for 8 hours? It wouldn't be randomly daytime now if this was Scourge Lockdown was just continuing, but I'm all for retconning Flint's work. So apparently now, the Destructors and Scourge all went to sleep for 8 hours after escaping prison, and only then did they have that conversation. That makes more sense. They'd be tired. We pick up from where Scourge Lockdown left off. Fiona's got a horribly stupid line right away because she actually says she busted Scourge out of prison for nothing, when it should be obvious that the real reason she broke him out was because she's in love with him and wanted to be with him again. And it'd be mind-numbingly stupid if she ever planned on leaving him for Phernidivus. She would never do that. Well, at least it's interesting that Scourge is calling her out on not telling him about Phernidivus and asking why he should help her out with that. He's got trust issues with her, which only started after she left him in the fight in Freedom HQ. So now he's annoyed with her for keeping something from him and not telling him about it as soon as she could. It's interesting to see Scourge want more communication in the relationship, and not Fiona. It's a role reversal. Of course, the comic picks up where Scourge Lockdown left off, with Fiona arbitrarily demanding Scourge to do what Phernidivus wants, even though she clearly was creeped out by him the last time she worked for him, and was warning Scourge to be careful around him. So you'd think that if anything, she'd want any excuse to leave him and never work for him again. But this has to pick up from where Flynn left off, even though he left off on her having a confusing out-of-character moment again. I love that Scourge even lampshades this. I just don't get why you even want to work with him again. None of it adds up, V. I noticed right away that this is the same thing Sonic would have said. He's not sounding like a pure evil villain who wants to do everything evil he can think of for no reason. He's sounding like he disapproves of Phernidivus for how evil he is, and won't work for him because even he has standards. He's sounding like Sonic, which is how it normally should sound because he's him from a different universe. Right away I'm impressed. This is already better characterization for him than the last time he worked for Finidivus, where instead of agreeing with Fiona on Finidivus being creepy, he just says he can't be that bad because of how he looks. Even though you'd think he'd be very untrusting and cynical, because how else could he justify being evil to innocent people? It's a shame Fiona's response is such garbage. Does it really matter? Yes! Of course it does! She's the same person who was uneasy about working for Finidivus in the first place. Now she's just a mindless slave to him, apparently, not questioning working for him at all. And it's not explained that he brainwashed her. She's not saying that she's just scared of what Finidivus would do to her if they didn't do what he wanted, and she doesn't even have that in the thought bubble. She used to be a freedom fighter. You'd think it'd be Scourge trying to convince her. So I'm just confused as hell that the same person who told Snively that he and Robotnik should do better things with their life is now insisting that Scourge work for Finidivus, while only Scourge wants nothing to do with them. It makes sense if she just explained that Finidivus could go after her and Scourge with his warp rings and punish them anytime he wanted, and that's the only reason why she's insisting on him not avoiding him like the plague. Why is she being so fanatically loyal to Finidivus and demanding Scourge to not betray him? Isn't that really ironic for a traitor who is going on a big rant about how she doesn't owe anyone anything and she's independent now? This isn't really the comic's fault, it's Flynn's fault for having Fiona act totally out of character at the end of Scourge Lockdown and making no effort to explain why she was that way, other than her saying that you don't want to mess around with Finidivus. But come on, if Scourge can move at the speed of sound, I can imagine him easily beating him up and killing him before he even gets a chance to move. I love that my assumption about Scourge is proven right immediately. Right after he lampshades how stupid Fiona's being when she was part of the Brain Trust earlier, he says that Finidivus' new goal is probably another Project Enerjack thing. And that plan was bent on destroying everything, so he's not answering him until he knows what he's up to. This is so interesting. Like he's got actually good characterization for the first time in ages. Of course an alternate Sonic would be opposed to destroying the world. Even the Fleetway evil Sonic wasn't about that, and he was way eviler than him. And somehow Fiona sighs, says there's a lot to explain, and doesn't instantly explain like literally the entire audience would want. And instead just says they gotta go now, as if she can't explain while they're going. This definitely contrasts how Scourge and Fiona were last time he worked for Finidivus. Fiona clearly showed she still had attachment to Mobius as a planet because she was hesitant about leaving Mobius with him, even at that point. So even though the world was being threatened with destruction because of Finidivus, Scourge had to do some extra convincing just to get her to leave. And Fiona was creeped out by Finidivus and reluctant to work for him, which made more sense for a former freedom fighter used to fighting bad guys. At this point, Scourge has probably gotten so sick of the fact that every time he works for another bad guy, it backfires on him, that he's learned his lesson from it and is fed up with it. He even says that he's in charge now and he's doing things his way. It's completely different from how, before, he was perfectly fine with working for Robotnik twice, and Robotnik Prime, and I'd always thought that was stupid of a rebellious delinquent to do, and asked why I'd even consider it. So now he's gotten character development since then, and is leaning more towards doing things his way, and doesn't really want to repeat the same mistake if it could just backfire on him again. Then he says that he would consider working for him if he had something useful for his plans. He doesn't learn, does he? This is probably the exact same justification he had for every other time he worked for a bad guy. And it always backfired on him. When was it ever worth it? Robotnik tried to drown him, and Robotnik didn't even try to save him from being roboticized. He's been shown time and time again that bad guys don't care about him and can't be relied on to even reward him and use him as an ally properly. But I guess he's convinced himself that only Robotniks are horrible to work for. Finidivus never outright betrayed him. He just had a destructive plan that he doesn't like the idea of. There's a reason he called him Spooky Von Evil. I guess I can see his logic, because Finidivus was the best bad guy he ever worked for, but that's still a pretty low standard, and he looks like an idiot. But at least it's in character for him. For once, I can understand a character being an idiot, because he's doing it from falling back on his old ways, and he's done this so many times before. He wants an easy shortcut to an advantage for himself because he's impatient, and convinces himself that it'll all work out for him. Technically, working for Finidivus never backfired on him before, You know, aside from the fact that laying low like he told him to did nothing but waste time on him that he could have spent bothering Sonic every day. Making me immediately question why he didn't rebelliously go off on his own and bother Sonic anyways, instead of being polite enough to leave him alone most of the time he was on Mobius when he knows where he lives. Yeah, him working for him was still stupid. Aren't rebels supposed to be independent? They don't want to look weak by looking like they have to rely on others, but gangs exist, which is them relying on others. And he was part of a gang. So ever since he joined that gang, he's completely given up on being completely independent because he can't be at this point. Just because he's going to use Finidivus for his own goals doesn't mean he approves of him, he just wants to take advantage of him. And it kinda makes sense that he thinks that that was smart. If he's thinking that returning to Sonic is in any way smart when it's just gonna risk him getting sent to prison again just because he wants revenge so badly, then he's clearly not doing rational thinking anyways. He shouldn't even think talking to Sonic again is worth it. But if he's anything like Sonic, he's about being impulsive, impatient, and proving himself. So he's more run by emotions than anything. Fiona confirms that he does have something to help Scourge, but only help if he does the job. So she easily manipulates him into doing what he says, smirking all the while for no reason whatsoever. Would it kill these writers to just explain why she's doing this? She's not a mindless puppet of Finidivus. We could have seen him put a hex on her, so she was. She left the Freedom Fighters because she thinks independently. What's independent about her right now? The destructors are all in agreement with her, so there's nothing independent and assertive about her telling Scourge to change his mind because she's just going with the groupthink. And if she was all about just that, she'd still be with Sally. It isn't like her to be demanding to work for someone else she doesn't like. That's almost as stupid as Leonda doing that. She has to be just trying to avoid him going after them for revenge if no one helps him in his goal. One thought bubble from her would clear that up, but she doesn't look scared. Why would she ever be happy about all this instead of reluctant and frustrated? When Mobius was about to be destroyed because of what Finidivus was doing, she didn't even crack a smile. She's so confusing. I miss when she was a good character, where I could understand what Scourge and Sonic saw in her. Like after issue 160. But starting with issue 172, it's like she was replaced by an evil doppelganger, considering how radically she was changed. The only thing good about all of this is that Scourge is showing such reluctance to work for him. He even calls him evil again. If he was really that evil, then calling someone evil would be a compliment coming from him. It's interesting to see a supposedly cliche evil twin showing morality. If it was really just about him trying to be independent, then why would he even consider working for him if all he cares about is being independent? And at that point, why doesn't he ditch the destructors? He doesn't belong with them. They're just generic heartless thugs with no personalities. They're just cardboard boxes with different designs. Speaking of which, here they are. I guess they were watching them the whole time and were just not on the panels. Because from the looks of the previous pages, you'd forget they were there. But that does suit their forgettable personalities. Why do they want to work for Finidivus? Why do they want to risk destroying their world? Who knows? Never mind that the ape guy used to want to fight Eggman as a freedom fighter, right? No, fuck that. Mammoth Mogul was so much more fun to stand around with. He's just as much of a thug as they are instead of just continuing to do that. They're all the same character over and over again, with the sole exception of Flying Frog, who's just in there as an attempt to be memorable. Which reminds me of what I said about the hippie character in the Down Under Freedom Fighters. All of them are the same except for him, who's just there in a sad attempt to be memorable. Having one wacky character doesn't make an entire group of boring people interesting and likable. I still have no respect for them at all and couldn't care if they were blown up. Scourge is more respectable without them. These guys don't care about him. They judge and mock him if he showed any kind of soft side or depth, and that's not true friends. While I want to see them use their special abilities a lot, I want them to show depths even more. What are their hobbies? Did they have any loved ones at any point? It's cool that Predator can fly and one of them is super hearing, but that's all they're good for, and Scourge would be better off getting gadgets from boomers that did the same thing they could do. It's not like we ever see any of them pet a kitten. They have no relatability at all. One of them's literally called Predator. Who would name their kid that? None of them ever say that they're only working for Finidivus in the hopes that he take down Eggman, which would make sense as a motive for a former freedom fighter. That was the whole reason he left his people in the first place. Finidivus tried to destroy the world last time they worked for him. It'd be fine if they explained that they have faith in the heroes to stop him because he was stopped before, and they really just want to get to the point where his destructive plan kills Eggman, because he came really close with the Project Enerjack plan. Enerjack Knuckles destroyed most of Eggman City, and if the plot was running on logic at that point, then he would have destroyed Eggman too, and that would be the first thing he would have done, because that was the whole reason he agreed to go Enerjack in the first place. Maybe Simeon's just trying to chance it again and get the Death Egg destroyed? But he doesn't say that or think that, and considering how all of the destructors are equally blandly evil, I'm guessing that wasn't a thought in any writer's mind. We don't even know if they had abusive parents to justify the behavior. At least with Scourge and Fiona, it's implied. I don't want Scourge to be put in prison again, but I sure want it to happen to these guys. But I guess it's good to have some even more unlikable characters around to make Scourge more tolerable. But you've already got post-ruined Fiona for that. It's not like she's hugging him and complimenting him, so she's not making a good girlfriend to justify her existence. So far she's got no appeal. As you can see from my talking too much, maybe this is just an excuse for me to talk about Archie Sonic again. I read this comic in the first place because I miss Archie so much, and I really want to see how Scourge's plan will pan out. But I hope Archie Sonic Online will rate Fiona better than this. Because she's not a coward to the point where she'd do anything for Finidivus. Or she wouldn't have ever trusted Scourge, let alone spent all that time with him. So Scourge plans to visit the dock, which at first I assumed meant Kintovor because he's smiling while saying this, when he's reluctant to work for Finidivus. At least that helps prove that he's got a mask on, figuratively, and isn't opposed to lying about liking what he's doing, and looking eviler than he is. Because it looked like he was happy about it, but he's not. And he can't fully explain why he's not without looking like a softie. There's a reason that he specifically mentioned that Finidivus' plan merely destroyed a planet when he complained about him. And it can't be because he approved of it, or he'd be complimenting that plan. And the artist at least tries to have Fiona be affectionate to Scourge, but I don't care because we don't really see what she's doing. I guess she's putting her hand on his back, but that's all. And he's in too much of a bad mood to appreciate it because he really doesn't want to do what Finidivus says. So he just says she owes him big time. And at least she has the self-awareness and constitution to not have her feelings hurt by that and just says that she knows. That's a pretty rushed panel though. And then they create a warp ring, and Fiona somehow expects that to be a part of her end of the bargain. If they have a warp ring that can warp them to wherever they want, then logically, I hope they eventually use it to just go straight to Kintovor's lab, because come on, teleportation is such an overpowered ability. It can easily be a story breaker if you don't properly write the story around it. Why doesn't Shadow just warp to Eggman and take him down already? But of course, since they're going to work for Finidivus for no reason, they use the warp ring to go to him. Oh, why did the next page have to be completely wasted? Didn't Scourge already know that these warp rings were from Finidivus and Scourge Lockdown? Why would this warp ring have that weird electricity bar around it when the other ones he made didn't? We didn't need an entire page dedicated to them walking into the warp ring. I assumed they just walk into it in one panel. Anyways, another entire page is wasted because they comment on Finidivus not being right there when he was expecting them, so he should have been right in front of him like I assumed. Scourge at least lampshades that he should have left the lights on instead of being a generic cliche villain who wants the lighting dark for the atmosphere. You'd think if he wasn't the slightest bit disillusioned with his pointless life of villainy, he would have made the Judge robot blow up, instead of Sonic doing it in Latijopolis. Because he would have done a lot more crimes than just graffiti. After Finidivus has a generic, boring villain dialogue like I expect, and Scourge is nervous around him, Finidivus tells him that his job is to retrieve a sample from the sublevels of Kintovor's hospital tower. A sample? Finidivus looks like he's creating a hologram of a purple DNA strand from his glove. Scourge is furious with him for telling him to break into his tower for that. While he could never admit it to his friends, this just comes off as him being morally opposed to him. Because really, why else would he object to this so much that he gets mad at him? This is just Scourge taking any excuse to get mad at him. I kinda get the point he's pretending to make in front of his bad guy friends, though. Because if he wants to get a DNA sample, then if his goal is to retrieve anything, then why doesn't he just teleport to it and get it himself? The plot should be over by now. Why does he think he needs Scourge's help for that in particular? Retrieving something when you can teleport would be the easiest thing ever. But it does make sense that Fionidas can't warp to a planet he's never been to. That would be ridiculous. He'd need Scourge only because he's been to his planet. So he's the only one who could do the proper visualization to warp there with his warp ring. It is a very simple and easy task, so there wouldn't be a challenge to Scourge at all. Only he's been in Kintibor's tower among them, so only he could warp to it. But you'd think that if he was really as pure evil as everyone thinks he is, he would just relish in the chance to do something evil, no matter what it is. And so his only reaction would be to smirk and say that he's looking forward to it. So this is a lot more interesting characterization for Scourge than what we used to have. This shows some fascinating depth to his character that hasn't been seen in such an obvious light before. He's probably had a lot of time to think about his life and mistakes when he was in prison. All Fionidas does to try to convince him is remind him that he wants revenge on Sonic. He's so obviously manipulating. And it says that his reward for doing what he wants will benefit him a lot. But Scourge isn't exactly happy to hear that. He's still just as reluctant and unwilling, and even his thoughts are just sarcastic with him for how unconvincing he's being. He's thinking, ugh, well when you put it that way. It's telling us that he's only doing this because he thinks he doesn't have a choice. If he was the pure evil twin monster that Sonic thinks he is, his only reaction would be to smirk and look forward to getting revenge on Sonic, like a generic villain. Instead, he really doesn't want to get that sample in the hands of Fionidas. He's learned his lesson, he knows he's a bad guy, and does he look happy about it? No, not even when he shakes his hand. If anything, he's acting like how Sonic would if he had to make a deal with Fionidas. He's not just cackling and laughing maniacally at the idea of getting back at Sonic. This is what's great about Scourge. He's a deeper character than you'd expect. He's never been as evil as people think he is. Otherwise, you'd think he would have just rushed to Kintibor's tower with a bomb and destroyed it in 3 seconds when he first met him, not taking so long with bothering it that it's still standing today. While he tried to portray himself as just an evil twin being evil just for the sake of it, he's been holding back since the beginning. If he did stuff just to be evil, he'd be happy about working for Fionidas and be eager about the world's destruction, not looking resentful of him and uneasy. Then Fionidas tells them to disarm the security field first before infiltrating the tower. I have a question. Why don't they just warp inside the tower to begin with? If they can teleport anywhere the Scourge can visualize, why the fuck can't they just teleport anywhere he can visualize? I guess we're supposed to just assume that his security field magically prevents people from summoning warp rings to his tower and warping to it. That does make sense. It'd be a really pathetic security field otherwise, because Boomer would probably have tried to make portals to it. Remember when he made a zone-like generator? Why didn't he warp to Kintobor with that? But Fionidas isn't explaining this, he just confuses me. I can only assume the security field is a magical enchantment against portals to his base. I can only assume that the security field is a magical enchantment against portals to his base. Seriously, how does Fionidas even know that Kintobor has a hospital tower? Let alone know that he has a sample there that would benefit him. He couldn't possibly be able to get to that planet himself, because we've already been told since Silver's first appearance that you need to visualize the place before you can warp to it, which is the only logical way that magically teleporting yourself to a place would make sense. And he's never been to that planet. And of course, while we can't assume Scourge told him about the hospital tower's basic conversation about his life, why would Scourge know about that sample all the way back then when he was working for Fionidas, just so he could tell him about it back then? He doesn't live with Kintobor, and there's a security field keeping him away from his tower, so he has no reason to know what his plans are. He's not exactly bragging about them at the top of his lungs, is he? He doesn't like Fionidas enough to open up to him and tell him all about his life, does he? Although I guess that would be such a basic thing that... But... Did Fionidas force him to tell him about his life? If Fionidas can even find out there's a sample, why didn't he warp to it and get it himself? I can only imagine him finding out about it by either one, Scourge somehow knew about it all the way back then and told him after attacking his tower, or two, Finivis set the prospective warp location of a warp ring to Kendabor's tower when he doesn't even know what it looks like, and spied on him to learn about what he's inventing. It would make more sense if he had a zone generator. So I can only assume that the former is the case because the latter would break a rule established about how warp rings work. They have to work by visualization of where to go because they're just rings. We don't see anybody holding any device with a screen on it showing them other dimensions, and buttons to choose which dimension they want to go to and which specific part of it. That would be good interface for a warp device. Like the kind I'd expect the zone-like transporters to have. How did Boomer make a way better warp device than Finivis? The latter of whom came from an advanced Echidna city. He sure is smart. I guess technology is better on Anti-Mobius. And after Scourge leaves, Finivis calls him a sucker basically, which confuses me. Is he just completely lying about this plan benefiting Scourge? Because if his plan is to destroy the planet where Sonic lives, then that would benefit Scourge as far as he's concerned because he wants to just get rid of the Prime Sonic and become the most important one. That's why he didn't just kill him in a second with super speed and all the times he's fought him. Oh wait, that makes no sense. Clearly that's not the only thing he cares about. But as far as Finivis should be aware, it is. If Scourge felt like holding back in all of his fights with Sonic, and only tried to kill him twice and only years after he met him, then does he really care about getting rid of him? I'm sure he thinks he does, since he said so in issue 19, but he could just run up to Sonic and snap his neck in a second. A fight as short as that wouldn't be fun, so I guess he was dragging them out to have fun, but he never had fun with them because they always missed their attacks because they're too fast for each other. You'd think he'd give up on enjoying it after the first one. The most fun fight was their most recent one. If he actually wants to get rid of Sonic, then why didn't he kill him before he finished talking and scar everyone who sees it for life? And cackle in their faces because he did it just to make them miserable. Sure, I know the meta reason, that wouldn't make a good story, but I'm talking logically here. If he's pure evil and just wants to murder Sonic, he would have done that after all this time. It's like he's not even trying. He has Sonic speed. If he really wanted to kill someone, he'd be able to kill anyone he wants in a second. Just spin dash through them. So I have to wonder how Scourge would actually feel about finally beating Sonic. He'd be relieved and proud at first, but what about later? I wasn't sure about this at first, but remember what he said in issue 24? Same old routine, day in and day out. The only time anything exciting ever happens to me in this universe or another is when I butt heads with that butthead Sonic the Hedgehog. So killing him would be pretty stupid, wouldn't it? You can think you want something, and then realize you didn't when you get it. And in this case, how boring would Scourge's life be if he was the only Sonic? Sonic's the only one who can give him an exciting challenge. He's the only one who really woke him up. Without him, it would be the same routine over and over, because that's what his life would be if he was ruling a planet. And that's what he got bored of. Miles even confirmed he got bored of that. You'd think he'd learn his lesson by now. And I said the only Sonic because if Sonic is needed to make his life exciting to the point where he went out of his way to go fight him just for that, then realistically, if he beats the Prime Sonic, then he'll just move on to challenging other Sonics. He won't stop at the first one because he'll get horribly bored. And that's assuming he won't feel guilty and stop after the first time, like if he sees how Tails reacts. Who knows how he'd really feel about doing that? Worst case scenario, he keeps trying to challenge Sonics and just get himself sent to prison again because he'd get unlucky. And he was lucky he broke out the first time. He really is an idiot. Nothing about how he's lived his life has made him happy. He hated ruling a planet. He was depressed with Alicia in Sonic Super Special 10. And all of his evil plans backfire. The only thing he hasn't tried is being a freedom fighter. My point is, I don't know why Finivis said he's foolish when if his plan succeeds, he'll get Prime Sonic destroyed like he thinks he wants, and as far as Finivis knows, that would greatly benefit him, and that was the whole reason Scourge agreed to work for him. Unless Finivis thought Scourge through as much as I have, and realized that it wouldn't greatly benefit him, because he'd just keep challenging Sonic to get thrown in prison anyways. If he's unsure enough of his superiority to think he needs a new green form, and a redundant and confusing power boost when he could attack at Sonic speed to begin with, so how could he ever get more powerful? Then one Sonic being defeated won't get rid of his inferiority complex. He'd still feel redundant because he's not the only Sonic, and doubt his own worth because he's the evil Sonic, and everyone thinks the heroic ones are better than him. And if he was desperate enough to try to get rid of all the Sonics just to pass it over to someone else to kill steal for him, he just wastes time trying to do that plan again. Maybe Finitevus knows that Scourge is just ruining his own life because of his Sonic obsession, and even if his plan does benefit him, it won't matter. It helps that he said foolish boy instead of literally calling him a sucker and saying that his plan isn't going to power him up or something. Anyways, this issue was by Scourge's best buddy from Deviantor, and I love how Scourge was portrayed in it. The minute I saw that he was complaining about Finitevus almost destroying the world, I was like, they got his character perfectly here. He's never been as pure evil as you'd expect. Every single time I saw him doing something, anything, I was always questioning why he wasn't being eviler. There were like 25 times when he didn't kill somebody on screen. And the only explanation I can think of is that he's still got a conscience. So it makes perfect sense that instead of being a boring cliche evil twin and being happy about working for Finitevus, he's reluctant and even furious at it. And it's not just because he wants to be his own boss, because he wouldn't have complained about his destructive evil plan and taken any excuse to be furious with him if he approved of him. Unfortunately, because of Fiona Finitevus' manipulation, he thinks that he needs to work for Finitevus and take advantage of him, as an easy shortcut to getting the upper hand on Sonic, I guess. But he never says that's what he's looking forward to, other than one panel where he smiles about it. Sadly, Scourge and Finitevus were the only things I really loved about this issue. I hated how Fiona was portrayed. Why does she want Scourge to work for Finitevus? I think if anything, you'd expect their roles to be reversed. It wouldn't be so hard to explain that Finitevus cast a brainwashing spell on her to make her loyal to him. She's trying way too hard to get him to work for him and not even trying to explain why she approves of it. It does matter because if a character's actions are just confusing and arbitrary, and totally at odds with their past history, that's frustrating. Even the old treasure hunter Fiona would never want to work for Finitevus. She hated him last time. And if she's just working for him because she's scared of him wanting revenge for being betrayed, then she shouldn't be, because she should know that Scourge could just kill him in a second with his super speed. Unless she knows that Scourge doesn't have the guts to kill people. Literally the only time he did was his father, and one, we never saw it, so he could have just been lying to intimidate Jules. And two, it makes more sense if that was an accident from him beating him up at this point, because he'd really want to have him kept alive in a prison for the rest of his life, because that'd make him suffer more. And if he was the type to kill people at every opportunity, why didn't he kill Patch after all the times he tried to kill him? But even if he didn't kill Finitevus, I think he'd still beat him into a coma and cripple him, which he could do just fine by attacking him a bunch of times before he could finish talking. I can't imagine him being opposed to doing that to people. Sure, he never did it to Patch when he took his eye out perfectly fine. But maybe the reason he's kept him alive and uncrippled is because he's got attachment to him for being in his gang for so long. And he actually wants Patch to like and appreciate him instead of being the terrible friend that he was. That's the only explanation I can come up with because it made no sense otherwise. A complete monster wouldn't put up with Patch trying to kill him all the time. 4 times in 1 week. And he certainly wouldn't be afraid of his gang punishing him for it. And he did put Kintabor in a coma, but Kintabor's such a good person that it makes sense that he'd want to hold back on him so much. He never made him have to wear an eye patch. If he was so evil, why didn't he spin that shell of the net he was captured in and kill him at the end of his first appearance? Finitevus, on the other hand, is pure evil and he actively hates him, and has no reason to have any attachment to him. So I think Scourge would beat him into a coma perfectly fine, and Fiona should know that. But I guess she's pulling a Sally on him and still doesn't have faith in him to win. You'd think he'd call her out on right away. I guess it's just because she loves him so much that she doesn't want even the slightest risk of Finitevus killing him. And she's so scared of that happening that she thinks it's worth not messing with him and getting Scourge to take advantage of him for his own sake. But I wish she'd just say that and explain herself so she doesn't just feel like a cardboard box who's advocating working for a villain just for the sake of having a villain. To the point where she makes Sonic's evil twin look like the good and reasonable one. Why do any of these grunts want to work for Finitevus? They knew he tried to destroy the world before. I guess they're just that heartless, but that makes Simeon's backstory fighting Eggman pretty confusing then. They never told us that Finitevus paid them $1 million or something to work for them, and we didn't see them living in mansions the next time we saw them, So it's not like the work paid enough to be worth it. It'd be perfectly fine if they just explain that they think Finivus' plan will be stopped like last time, and they're just trying to get Eggman taken down by it, like he almost was last time. They could really work as an extremist group of freedom fighters, especially since I was always questioning why they don't fight Eggman, and especially since Simeon used to fight Eggman. Then it make their plan really intriguing, and I'd be rooting for them. You kinda need to have your audience rooting for the main characters. Explaining character motivations is the most important part of writing a story. That's what you need to focus on first and foremost, because it makes the characters feel real. This comic, and Archie in general, would really benefit from doing that for every character that matters to a plot. That's the thing that would make the story go from frustrating to really enjoyable. Because while I love seeing Scourge do stuff in a plot and being way better characterized than Flynn had him, to the point where he hates someone for trying to destroy a planet when he tried to do that himself because of Flynn, I can't fully enjoy the story when the destructors and Fiona are confusing the hell out of me. Sure, they want to take advantage of him, but it wasn't worth it in the slightest the last time. So it can't be that simple, or they're all complete morons. And it would be perfectly fine if they just explained that he put a hex on them too, like he did to control Knuckles. Maybe he can only brainwash someone with as much magic in him as Knuckles. Bottom line for the story is, I'm glad it exists. I love Scourge's characterization, but the motives of the unlikable bad guys he's with are in desperate need of explaining. And speaking of explaining, we get virtually no explaining of Finivus' plan either, which is the whole thing everyone wanted to know about since Scourge Lockdown. So there's no excuse for not explaining it right away. A DNA sample? What's he planning to do with that? Clone a grunt for him? And how the flying fuck did he know about it? We need more explaining, but we didn't get it because the pacing was slow, because Fiona wasted most of the story arguing with Scourge, while not explaining her position in the slightest. So it was less arguing and more, please do what he wants, for me? So it was confusing, and it could have easily not been.